Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks where kindred souls gather together to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as the February Room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for composite development fly rods and accessories. 40 years of Kiwi ingenuity and graphite technology, now available at cd-fishing.us or your local CD USA dealer. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And remember to go fishing. Here's your host, the Carnops, and this is the February Room.
Most successful fly fishing ventures begin as an idea scribbled on a bar napkin. The formula includes a passion for fly fishing, of course, and a product or service that fills a niche. From there, it really comes down to commitment, elbow grease, and perseverance. Our guest today carved out a niche in a region that withstood the Ice Age, and we can't wait to hear the full story of Black Earth angling. Kyle Zempel, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, happy to be here.
And as we started this episode, we let you know this is the first time Jess and I are co-interviewing, and we're excited to hear some fishing stories from you, Kyle.
Yeah, I think I probably have one for you.
All right, man, fire away. Fire when ready.
Well, so recently I guess it shouldn't be recently, but it's I've been going saltwater fishing in my off season quite a bit, and so I'm going to take you to the flats of a unknown destination, and I was out bone fishing this past, well, I guess it would have been last February, and was out there doing my thing, searching around, and had been fishing for about a week and a half at this point, out there searching around for bonefish. And earlier in the day, I had run into another guy who I was fishing with, and he had said that he had this rather large shark chase down one of his bonefish. And we've been walking away bone fishing for probably up to, probably 8 years now. And it's one of the biggest sharks he had seen on a flat. It was like one of those where his back was like out of the water type of deals. And this is an inland flat, mind you, so it's not real common to have large sharks out there. Most of them are, in the 3 to 4 foot range, and usually nothing of too concern. And so I was out there later that day, and I had spotted this moving shape in the distance, and it was a shark. And I thought to myself, that it's a good sized shark. But I kept looking for bonefish, and you're kind of scanning and pretty focused in at that point, and walking along and kind of peek over there in that direction again, and it's kind of making its way my direction. It's a long ways out at this point. Sharks are usually pretty easy to spot from a distance, and I keep looking for bonefish and carrying on, and again, he's still coming straight my way, which isn't uncommon for sharks out there. They're pretty curious creatures. I think they hear a little commotion and they head that way, and normally they get a little close to you or uncomfortable. You can stomp your foot, and that'll usually send them off in the opposite direction. But usually I'm not too bothered by them, and it's something that you experience out on the flats pretty regularly. And kind of watching this thing, and it's getting a little close for comfort, and so I do the normal stomp the foot, and this shark just full speed accelerates right at me, and I'm like, I would love to hear the noises that were coming out of my mouth at that point, but I start running in a backwards direction, which is probably the last thing you want to do, is make more commotion. And I'm like slapping my rod at it, and it's like, and next thing you know, it's like between my feet, and it's just like like just the bottom's all stirred up, and I can see it's like back, and I I'm jumping up and down, and like I stomp on its head, and it turns and like bolts off. And I am just rattled. Like my whole body is just like shaking at this point. And, I like I said, I'd spend enough time on the flats to know that, sharks usually aren't a big deal out there, especially like in the inland flats where, they're not oceanside. They just can't come up out of blue water or anything like that to be on the flats. So I was rattled, to say the least. And I'm about probably 3 miles from where I get off the flat, and so I have to now decide if I want to continue to fish or bugger out of there. And so it was. I decided I'd be best if I could maybe just fish my way back towards the direction I needed to go, but it became a little difficult when I was looking over my shoulder the entire time behind me. Yeah. So, I mean, not really a Midwest story, but something that rattled me quite a bit. And then the worst part about it was I got back probably, right around sunset to where I have to cross this deep channel. And at low tide, it's no big deal. It's maybe, just above your belly button. And then at high tide, it's you can't touch. So you got to swim across it. And I'm sitting there and like, again, I'm usually not too freaked out by by this type of stuff, and I'm like trying to pep talk myself to cross this it's like a, I don't know, 30-yard deep, 30-yard channel to the shore, and you can't really see in the water at this point, and I'm out there just kind of like pep talking myself to swim across this channel, knowing that that thing's still out there somewhere, yeah. So it was an experience that I probably won't forget, and had never really had it on the water. So I thought that would be a fun one to share with you guys.
Do you remember what kind of shark it was?
I thought it was a lemon shark, but it all happened so quickly that I did not know. But it was big. I mean, it was like probably it was well over 5 feet. Like, it was like something that, and this flat in particular is a really nice one. It's like got really nice bottom. And so I've been barefoot wading, which if I can barefoot wade, I always do. You're just stealthier, the whole nine. And that day, I had ventured over to this area that I hadn't gone before, and the color of the bottom kind of changes, and I assumed it was maybe like a little more like crushed, like shell gravel, like a little more rough on your feet, maybe. And I had been waiting for like a week and a half at this point, so my feet were a little tired.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna throw my boots on today. And that was the first day I had put my boots on since I had been there. And I'm pretty glad I had them on, because I don't know if I would have been maybe missing a toe or not, but it was certainly right.
So was the shark like escorting you out of there, or did it hang around, or did you just not know where it was after the initial encounter?
I mean, he took off and like out of sight at that point. He kind of went back to the deeper water. And I mean, I stomped him pretty good, so I imagine he was like pretty turned off at that point. But after walking around, like I saw another shark that I like really freaked me out on the walk back, but it certainly wasn't the same size. And quickly, like, okay, calm down. Like this doesn't happen every day. So I don't know if it was just like some sort of shark with an attitude out there or what, but it was it was certainly it was really hard to bonefish after that, on the way back, because you got to kind of keep your focus out there, especially on foot,
Yeah.
and there was no focus to be had other than like, I want to get out of here.
Justin, do you remember when we were in the Bahamas?
That's what I was just gonna say. I thought you were gonna tell this story.
Honestly, we were in the Bahamas, and this was, what was that, like
5 years ago.
5 years ago?
Yeah.
Wow. But this was crazy. It was, what kind of sharks were they?
Those were tiger sharks.
Yeah. And there were so many of them. Our buddy who had an uncle that lives in the Bahamas was like, I have never seen this many sharks
on the flat.
And actually, like a week.
They were not. Yeah, it was highly, highly unusual and creepy as hell. And yeah.
But the same thing. I remember I was swimming, and the uncle was like, hey, there's a shark. You need to get out of the water. And I was kind of like right by the water. I mean, I was right by the boat. So I was like, I must have enough time to just jump out. And that shark just bead, it was crazy. And I jumped out. It was the scariest, but I know that feeling when you're like,
Yeah, that I had left the boat. I was on a stand-up paddleboard heading
yes,
over to go fish this flat on the other side. And, you know, there's lots of sharks in the Bahamas. You see them all the time. But this shark that swam by me looked completely different. And so I'm watching the shark go by me and I'm like, what in the hell was that thing? And then I hear this commotion over by the boat. And so instead of fishing, I kind of like, I'm going to turn around and go see what's up. So I go back over there, and yeah, this tiger shark was in a few feet of water on a flat, and it came right up to the little catamaran boat that Lauren and her friends were on.
yeah,
And yeah, it was really freaky, man. Like it was really unusual. And then, you know, what even made it more creepy was when we got home just a few days later, that snorkeler,
yeah.
that gal was dismembered by two tiger sharks in
Oh,
the
geez.
Bahamas.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
in the same area. Anyways, it's just crazy. So, no, I think that you have every right to be rattled.
Well, I think the worst part was is like that was like not even a thought in my mind when that thing was kind of heading my way that was going to happen, and something that was such a surprise. I think that's what rattled me probably the most was that like that was not the reaction I was expecting whatsoever.
Right. And so was that like one of those inland flats that the fish can only access at high tide?
Yeah, for sure. Yep, yep, for sure. And like it was, there's always like probably, like at least like 16 inches of water on this flat. But it was the incoming tide. I was fishing the incoming tide, and I was well into the incoming tide at this point. So there was certainly enough water in there. But we had been there for a week and a half, and I've been on other inland flats before, and never really seen a shark of that size there. So
Mm.
Yeah, and that same trip to the Bahamas, my buddy and I went to go check out this inland flat, and I had a bonefish rod and a cuda rod with me. And your description of seeing the shark, you know, kind of right when you laid eyes on the flat reminded me of this because I came over the horizon and I look out and there's this, you know, great big, beautiful inland flat. Looks like it's about 2 feet deep all the way across. And right in the middle, there's just this giant submarine sitting there. And so I mosey on down there and make a cast, and this cuda comes over and just crushes the fly. And it was a huge cuda. And it broke me off that day, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it broke me off. It just scissored 30-pound wire so fast. So I rearmed, and it was like 2 days later, we went back to that same flat, and I assumed it was the same CUDA. Was hanging out in there too again, and I threw the fly at it, and my buddy that was with me, who, you know, he rarely ever even brings his phone out to take a photograph on our trips, and he actually like starts filming it, and I was like, oh wow, well, if he's gonna film it, I'll I'll put my best effort forth here and try to make something happen. And the CUDA was kind of reluctant, but it ended up coming and following the fly, following the fly, following the fly. So I've got all this slack all everywhere, and it freaking eats it right on the rod tip and turns. And I mean, it's a big CUDA, man. Like, you know, I mean, it's all of 4 feet. It was a big CUDA. And, you know, it turns and just starts bolting, and I'm panicking. I'm trying to clear my line. Like, I can just see this whole thing going down. I'm like, oh God. And it reel wraps me and just snaps my fly line in half
oh
and
no.
out across like the entire flat. And my buddy got the whole thing on camera. It was hilarious. But
That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, it was crazy. Those things are mighty strong. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's nuts that there was a giant shark like that in on one of those inland flats. That's nothing I've ever seen. Like you said, there's usually like some little, you know, bonnet heads and stuff working around. But
For sure. Yeah. And like I always tell people like you don't really you don't understand like speed until you've been saltwater fishing, right? Like nothing in freshwater really moves that
puts
fast, right?
distance in perspective. Yeah. Oh, that shark's way over there. Oh
Yeah.
shit.
That is so true. Well, not only do we have shark experiences in common. We have the love of Wisconsin because you tell us about your home waters, Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm in Black Earth, Wisconsin. And it's the name of the town. We're just west of Madison. It's kind of an outer suburb, I guess, of Madison. And Yeah, I mean it's a fantastic place to be located. We have lots of fishing opportunities, and like you're nice and close to a really awesome city. Yeah, so like we're like Black Earth is kind of like the gateway to the Driftless. If you're coming from the eastern southeastern side of it, right? So we are kind of in the, I guess it would be the southeast corner of like the full on Wisconsin driftless area. So basically, if you head west in any direction, you are in it, which is pretty fantastic. Yeah, and so like one of the great things that we have is we have the opportunity to have both fantastic trout waters and really really great warm water um, opportunities. So we kind of have it all, which is really really unique to have that kind of diversity like right here at your doorstep.
Can you kind of describe the driftless area for somebody that's never been there?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, this it's a region, right? And it's a I think it's like roughly like 24,000 square miles. So it's not actually huge on the grand scheme of things, but um, it's an area that basically missed that the glaciers like missed, right? So the upper Midwest here basically got bulldozed over by the glaciers. When those glaciers receded, they leave a bunch of glacial drift, and this little area somehow just managed to not get glaciated, right? So it kind of I think like 70 to 80% of it lies in Wisconsin, but then uh, southeast Minnesota, northeast Iowa, and a little bit in northwest Illinois is kind of like that region, right? And the neat thing about it is because it wasn't glaciated, it's a very very old landscape. It's a karst topography, so it's all limestone, sandstone. There's breaks in the bedrock where water can go in or come out, and so basically you have these in areas underground rivers that will hit a valley and just bubble up out of the ground, right? And so I would say all, if not the large majority, of the streams within the driftless area are all freshwater limestone spring creeks, right? So, of varying sizes from, we always say like a road to sidewalk size. So largely a walk and wade ordeal, at least in Wisconsin. There's some larger ones in Minnesota. And, these are just super, super fertile, amazing cold water trout streams that are super special. I mean, I think limestone spring creeks don't make up maybe like 1 millionth of the water on Earth, and we have a good chunk of it right here, which is pretty awesome. And kind of overlooked in a lot of ways because I don't think we have like these famous trophy waters that you can float in a boat. Everything is walk and wade. For the most part. Yeah, it's pretty fantastic.
I always like the waiting part. It kind of feels like you're stalking. Reminds me a bit of more of hunting. I
Yeah.
I know you were just talking about how you target. You have like all these different type of fish species. How do you figure out which one to target? Is there like I mean, obviously I know muskies and you have smallmouth, but you also have trout. So like, how do you balance of like what fish you're going to target with your clients?
Yeah, oftentimes it's kind of due to just simply demand of like what people are looking for, and also time of year. Like I think we focus kind of heavily on trout in the spring, and then again kind of the late summer into the fall. That our April and May are kind of that peak dry fly hatches, and that's going to be the time that a lot of people are going to want to be here fishing for them, for the trout that is. And then the summer months, the streams start to get a little warmer. They are spring creeks, however. But we do get, if you've been to Wisconsin or the Midwest, we do get quite a bit of vegetation that grows, and it'll, the vegetation will get like over your head. It's like kind of like fishing in a jungle in a lot of places. So it becomes a little more difficult to get around. The fishing can still be very, very, very good, especially if we get some nice precipitation mixed in through the summer months. But we choose to go out on the Wisconsin River and chase after our warm water species. Um, so that's, largely for the summer months. That's going to be smallmouth bass. We do, that spring and fall is a mixture of trout and like pike and muskie as well. And it's kind of, and oftentimes, like, I call like May the hardest month to figure out what you want to fish for, because you can really, like, everything is going to be good in May, and same thing kind of goes in, like, mid-September into October, like,
October,
kind of
yeah.
everything's fantastic, right? So it's like,
October's great everywhere.
yeah,
That which
yeah.
October was 400 days long.
I know. I love October. We always talk about that, how much we love October.
Yeah.
For sure. And so, like, I've come up with like these things I call flex days, right? So like it allows the guide to kind of choose, and it's not like, hey, I want to fish for this. And oftentimes we'll get someone to book a day in May, and maybe it's like they want to go trout fishing, but it's like super bright and sunny. I mean, these spring creeks are running gin clear most of the time. And it's like, well, today probably isn't the best day for that. But because it's warm out and sunny, like, the smallmouth bass are really getting going. Like, we should go do that. So that's kind of one way I've like combated like that decision making process.
Do you see that the trout are like coexisting, living with these? Like, I mean, I guess like when you're targeting, like, say, trout, but you're probably in some waters where you're seeing pike and smallmouth. Are you seeing like they're coexisting pretty well? We have a lot of people on this podcast, the big pike debate with trout, especially here in Montana.
Sure, yeah, and a lot of our spring creeks, they're primarily trout. I mean, if you go down to the lower watershed of them, where they're gonna maybe be running into that larger warm water river, you'll see some pike and maybe some bass and stuff like that making their way into there. But high up on the watershed where you're fishing for the trout, there's not a lot of mixing that goes on. Usually, like, the trout waters are the trout waters, and um, some of those lower watershed areas is where people like to focus on, the bigger trout, and those bigger trout will hold their own, when it comes to, living amongst pike and bass and stuff like that. So we will occasionally see that. Um, in this time of year, there's been rumors of like the trout dropping way down into like the warm water rivers. Um, I've never caught one like in the Wisconsin River, but there's rumors that they are down in there. So yeah, that's the nice thing here, is that there is like a quite a separation of like what you're going to do, right? There's not many rivers where you're going to go and you're going to catch a mixed bag of trout and warm water species. So
It's amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like a really intriguing place to fish and guide. Around here, your flex day thing is kind of how we operate as well. We do trout trips in the spring, and then we start fishing for pike a little bit, and then we go back to trout, and then we go back to we switch to smallmouth and pike, and um, having all that variability and all those options at hand really makes guiding a lot more fun, I believe. Also, you have to know a lot more water, of course. So, for you, do you do most of the guiding, or do you have guides underneath you too, or how does Black Earth operate?
yeah, so we have another guide. His name is Wyatt Reeves. He's fantastic, young guy, really, 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 really energetic. He grew up like in the southern driftless area, and he knows it super well. And he also does a lot of our bass stuff in the summer too. But yeah, and then we'll probably be adding another guide or two here in the future. So it's not just me. I do have a team of people I work with.
What's your favorite fish to target?
Oh, smallmouth bass for sure.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We have so much in common, Kyle. It's like my favorite. I didn't realize how much I loved it until I caught my first smallmouth. I'm like, trout? I will never, I mean, I still love catching trout, but smallmouth is like where my heart's at. They are just amazing fish. And I just didn't also realize how many years it takes for a smallmouth to get big. Like, isn't it like, aren't they like when you catch like a huge fish, they're like 7 years old or something like that?
I think even older.
Yeah.
I'm sure Kyle knows better than us. We go fish in northern Wisconsin, where Lauren's family is from, and fish around the Hayward area. Yeah, the guy that we fished with over there, one of the guides from the Hayward Fly Fishing Company, was kind of filling us in on the lifespan of smallmouth, which kind of surprised us. Like we didn't know that they could live to
Yeah.
be like 20 years old, right? Or I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah. It's especially in those northern reaches. Kind of the colder the water stays, the slower and older that they'll get. Um, yeah, it's not uncommon, I think, for some of those fish to be in their 20s. You know what I mean? That's which is incredible, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, yeah, it's almost like you're holding a dinosaur, and they just do look like footballs. I mean, they're
Yeah, they
just
are the coolest fish.
yeah, I mean, I've just had such amazing experience. We actually went fishing for smallmouth, what Justin was just talking about, here in Montana, and it's not the same method that you would ever use in Wisconsin. So we did, what did we call that, Justin? The
Oh,
we had a
out
technique.
here, I employ a tactic we call the pop and drop. So
Yeah.
you get a fly rod with a popper on it and a spinning rod with a little soft plastic. So you stir them up with the popper, and typically around here the big ones are kind of reluctant to eat the popper. Um, so you stir them up with the popper, and then you feed the big ones underneath the soft plastic. So,
nice. I
fun
like that.
It
yeah.
is tag team. It's like, oh, but we caught like a really nice one. But yeah, what kind of method are how are you targeting these smallmouth in the driftless area?
Yeah, so I mean the neat thing is we have kind of a variety of different waters that you can get them in. Like I spend most of my time on the Wisconsin River, which is it's at the point where I'm guiding on it. It's big, right? It can be a quarter mile across in places, and um, it starts at the northern border where you're fishing up, like kind of more center of the state. Hayward's more west. The folks over, I know you guys interviewed Stu and Tim, and
Yeah.
Tim's a little more east of center, but Wisconsin's kind of like right down the cuts the state kind of right in half, and flows almost to the southern border, and then it turns at some point just north of Madison. It turns and heads basically like due west into the Mississippi, and that's kind of that area. Once it turns west, is known as like the lower Wisconsin, and it's like far and away different than most of your classic uh, northern Midwest bass water, right? It's you know I think when you think of Wisconsin smallmouth fishing, I'm sure you think of like these beautiful northern freestone type rivers, dark tannic water, pine trees, boulders, that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And I grew up like in north central, kind of the gateway to the Northwoods, and that's what I knew smallmouth water as was like this rocky dark water, really really kind of classic looking water. And then when I moved down this part of the state, it was a drought season, so the trout fishing was really tough in the summer, and I'd had a boat, and I talked to some guy. He's like, "Oh yeah, you got to go out in Wisconsin. There's and get after these smallmouth." And it had been on my radar a little bit, but at that point, I was like just enthralled with fly fishing for trout, right? And hadn't really dove into like doing it for bass that much. And so I went out there with my boat and like get to this place, and I'm like, what is this guy talking about? Like, this is not bass water at all, right? And it's the same river that like flowed through my hometown, right? But it changes dramatically. It goes to like the sand counties, and because of the glaciers, it's got this interesting valley that goes on, and it's primarily sand, right? I mean, if you look at pictures of the lower Wisconsin, it's going to look like this basically giant sandy desert filled with sandbars and you know deciduous tree, like mixed hardwood forest, and it's a completely like wild landscape. And so it is so it took me a while to like grasp all this, right, and learn how to fish this thing that's not a classic smallmouth river. And yeah, I mean it's kind of a wild deal, and we use a lot of the same tactics as you would as far as like top water and streamer stuff goes, but in a little bit different way. So we let me back up just a little bit there and say that like smallmouth are kind of designed to eat crayfish, right? That's like if there's crayfish in a river, that's what they want to eat when they can, right? That's they're
Yeah.
opportunistic feeders, but if they have the choice and there's a crayfish that's available, they're gonna eat it. It's a huge protein snack. Like they have little nerves on the bottom of their jaw that helps them detect, basically help detect crayfish, right? So
Yep.
they're built to eat these things. Right? And now you take yourself down to where I'm guiding for smallmouth, and it's all sandy, it's shallow, and the crayfish populations are there, but not in high numbers like they are up north. Not even close, right? Just because the substrate's not right for them. If you find little areas where there is some rock, you're going to find crayfish, and you'll find them here and there spread out through like some gravelly areas, but largely like they're few and far between. But what the lower Wisconsin does have is it's enormous baitfish population, right? Because it's a shallow sandy river that is just that's a good formula for producing massive amounts of baitfish. And I think that's what makes the whole thing just so unique, right? Is that they're having to basically chase schools of baitfish
Hmm.
versus kind of hanging out behind a boulder waiting for a crayfish to come by and then just gulping it up, right? They have to work hard for their food, right?
You're kind of painting a picture of, to me, it sounds like there's like some really cool sight fishing opportunities with these bass chasing bait fish on shallow sandbars.
Yeah, definitely, right. And that I think that's what that hooked me so hard into this place, and that's why I've kind of like just planted roots here. Is I just it's such a unique thing, right? I've yet to really see something similar to it, at least on its scale, right? And so anywhere in the natural world where fish feed primarily on bait fish, right? They are generally in schools, right? That's just it's more efficient. They need to have you know help corralling these big schools of bait fish. And so come to find out, the bass in the lower Wisconsin, kind of have more of like a saltwater feel to them where um, they hunt in packs. And I'm just talking like 3, 4 bass. I'm talking sometimes like hundreds of bass, right? Like where they are working as a team to, you know, corral baitfish, right? And obviously, like they don't look at each other and be like, "You're my teammate," right? So they naturally are working together, but also competing directly with each other. So it creates this crazy feeding frenzy, um, that is like, extremely exciting and like changes the way we fish topwater compared to how you do it up north, right? Like their food is on the move, and so we're
Uh,
using a lot of like
More action.
yeah, well, like we're using a lot of like topwater minnow patterns that are like like crease flies. I have one I call like the crash test dummy, which is just a version of the crease fly. And we're putting these things out there and moving them quickly, like you're trying to flee and get away. And right, that speed oftentimes is what triggers them. Which again, like if you go up and fish with Stu or Tim, uh, like they're going to tell you like don't move that fly. You're moving it too much. Like let it sit there, right?
We were told that
100%,
all the
man.
time. They're like, "What are you guys doing?" And we're like, "We're
I
moving, moving." And he's like, "You can calm down," because we're
I
just
grew
used to
up
pipe.
fishing smallmouth in Central Oregon on the John Day, and those bass there, like you can't move the popper fast enough.
Right, exactly. And it is similar to that, where like things need to be on the move, right? And we'll have our places and times where we are fishing more of your classic way that you'd fish a popper in the northern part of the state. But I think that's what is the real kind of allure of this lower river is that it is so drastically different than anything you're going to find, at least in the Midwest, right? Um, and so that's that's kind of the deal. And like, it's been kind of a fun challenge to be figuring all this out because, when I showed up down here, there was a couple guys fishing it, but there wasn't any information on it. And, like I went out there and I had seen this, like, this crazy feeding frenzy. And I was like, what the heck was that? And so I, of course, like went back and like started digging through the internet and books and whatever, trying to find something, right, to tell me what I just saw or like help me understand it or, blah, blah, blah. Right. And it just came up like pretty much completely empty. Right. There was a couple things I mentioned, like, like, oh, the summer months, the smallmouth get going and they will be pushing bait fish around. Right. And like, that was kind of the extent of what I had because most articles down here are written about walleye and catfish. and, and so like largely, I mean, I've kind of been like writing the book on it all, right? I've had to like figure it out completely on my own without like any sort of, you know, knowledge from any outside sources, which is, kind of a it's not a common thing in this day and age, right? To
No,
have,
Right.
like stumbled upon something that there's not information about already.
that's really
Um,
cool.
That is
yeah,
really cool. It's like stepping into a new planet and you get to write the rules of what that's going to look like.
absolutely. And it's super exciting and like, but also at the same time, it can be extremely frustrating because like there's nobody to bounce ideas off of or like say,
Right.
hey, like, what do you think about this? And like, so I mean, I've, when I first started, like, I was like, I just like dove deep into like trying to figure out what is this thing, and like, I thought it was maybe this one spot that this happened. And then like, I'm 10 years in now, with my guide business. And like, I've, it's like, it's far more, widespread than I initially had thought. And, like I'd catch myself like crawling up in these overhanging trees above like one of these spots with the krill and baitfish just to like observe and watch, like, how do they move? What are they doing? This is like something, it's so different than like what I grew up bass fishing, like grew up like, you know, on a northern Rocky River, right? They didn't do that. Maybe they did it at a creek mouth or something like that in the spring when, maybe that creek was pumping in some warmer water and the bait fish were kind of like corralled there, or, like they were congregated there. But then, once the water warmed up, like all that went away. But this is like how they feed all the time, right? All throughout the whole entire summer, right? And so it's, and it's to those people who have like been following me, like I basically like deemed this event, right? Like I've named it like the crash, and that's like the thing, right? And that's like what everyone wants to experience is getting to see that phenomenon that's going on out there, because it is just that, right? It's happening whether you're there or not. And I think that's what makes it so unique, right? Is that you're out there like looking for this event to happen, and then like you're just kind of a fly on the wall. And like I could literally, I mean, I do, because I'm not fishing. Like I sit in my boat and I can just sit and watch this go on and on and on, and it's, it hasn't gotten old yet anyway. So um, it's pretty neat thing.
We might have to.
Oh, we gotta go. We gotta
We
go.
gotta
We
explore
gotta go.
Wisconsin.
Gotta go experience the crash.
Yeah, we
Uh,
only stick up north. I don't know why. We just like I stay at the cabin and I stay on my porch, my screen porch, and I barely leave like a mile radius of that screen porch.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's no reason. There's no reason to leave. I mean, northern Wisconsin's like near and dear to my heart. I spent a lot of time up there, and yeah, I don't blame you. But yeah, it is certainly something completely its own. And
But when you
you
start
know,
talking about Black Earth, you're just like,
well,
why?
yeah, it's funny when I first started going up to Wisconsin with Lauren and her sisters and her mom. They're like all sitting around on the cabin on this beautiful day reading books on the screen porch, and I'm looking around like, what the are we doing? We're in like the mecca of fishing here. We're not doing this, are we? Is this the plan? They're like, yeah, this is what we do. I'm like, no, no, no. I am out of here. So
I remember my mom.
the more and more I go up there, the more I explore, the more I am just infatuated with the place because it's so awesome.
I do remember mom when you came up for your first time to Wisconsin. She's like, Justin's acting like a little boy. You were just like popping to other people's like docks and like going there,
Yeah,
and then
where
you're
are you going? Can I
swimming.
come along? Have fly rod, let the fly rod. Yeah, get in the boat. Okay, let's go see what we can
And
do.
like my grandma and my aunt Addie like has a collection of like romance novels. They were
Oh
horrible.
God.
Justin was like, "What are you all reading?"
We all come up here and we read romance novels from the 70s and watch Lifetime movies. I don't think so.
And my aunt Addie and my grandma would like every time they read a book, they would describe if it was good. So it'd be like good, very good, and excellent. So we'd all
All with Fabio on the cover.
so I've had to like ended up having to like not read those anymore because I'm like, well, Justin's gonna never live up to Fabio. Smallmouth fishing tomorrow.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, awesome, man. How can people get in touch with you? I see. Well, you know what? We need to talk about your photography real quick.
Yes, beautiful work.
Yeah, I looked over this stuff. Yeah, pretty incredible imagery. Um, yeah, just give us a quick rundown on how you got into photography and where you're at with it now. You've had stuff published in a bunch of magazines I see here.
Yeah, and the my passion for fishing and photography kind of grew hand in hand. Honestly, like I I think we didn't travel a lot when I was younger, and like I like won the safety patrol trip to Washington D.C. And so like you
Right on.
know yeah, like fifth grade, right? My mom gave me her camera.
Good for
I
you.
was like like everyone's buying like fake Oakleys on the street. I'm like, I need more film, right? I was like buying more film and like just I think I don't know what it caught my mom. Like I think she just about you know shot me after I got home and had to develop 10 reels of film or whatever I took of just everything. I was like, it was such a neat way to like, wow, I can like show my whole family like where I was, right? And so that's kind of like where I caught the initial bug, and then I kind of just dabbled in it a little bit, and then started fishing, and like really like just love that fly fishing had taken me these really neat places, and like I loved how beautiful the trout were, and kind of on and on, right? And so I always like just like was wielding a camera with me, and that's kind of how it all got started. And then like started going, really got into fly fishing when I kind of like had a taste of it from a buddy, and then got a job out in Colorado working I was a zip line guide and
Fun.
outside of Durango, and so I lived on the like Animas, like along the narrow gauge train there, like no road access. Like that's how I got to work was by the train. And so like I was just like immersed in like this amazing place, right? Where there's like black bears running around and wildlife everywhere, and we'd fish every single day. Like where we worked was like a mile up the tracks, and so we had to walk the tracks a mile, and then we just pack our rods and then have dinner and walk back to our cabins and just fish our way back until dark. And like that was my life for a number of summers, which was like super, I think, influential in feeling that fire a little bit. And then kind of as I developed my fly fishing and started doing more of that, I started traveling to do it. And I've been lucky enough to have been all over the place. Like I've fished a lot of the all over the world, right? And bringing a camera in hand, right? And the two of them just go together really, really well. Um, so it's been a fun ride, and like like getting to see your work in a magazine is pretty great. And I know like it's becoming kind of less and less of actual printed magazines, which is it's a sign of the times, I suppose. But it's there's just something neat about seeing something printed in a publication, right? Like that's so neat.
I know. I'm kind of sad that. Well, I mean, it still exists and still obviously has an audience, but yeah, it's print is kind of where my heart lies too.
Yeah.
I still like to hold something in my hand and flip through the pages, and you just don't see as much of it anymore. But
Yeah, and then like the I hadn't, you know, like I grew up in Wisconsin, like, and I had never even heard of the Driftless area, right? And then I actually met, I don't know if you guys know Matt and Jerry from the Driftless Angler. They're a great fly shop, right in the kind of the the heart of it, the Viroqua, Wisconsin. They have a great shop there. But I actually met Jerry down in New Mexico coaching hockey, and she's like, "Oh, we just started a fly shop. It's called the Driftless Angler." I'm like, "What is this place?" And so like later, I came back from college and came back from Colorado, and I'm like, I remember this lady talking about this awesome trout fishing place. Like, and so I reached out to her. I'm like, I don't know if you remember me. Like, I coached your son in hockey at the skills camp down in New Mexico, and blah blah blah. She's like, oh my gosh, you know, and like made this crazy connection, and she gave me a couple places to check out, and I went to the like, you know, like took a trip into the Driftless area, and like it just blew my mind. Like, I'm like, this is the coolest place that's like in my backyard that I've ever experienced. And I mean, really just kind of made, I think at that point I realized like, I'm probably never going to leave here. It's such a special place. And it's like, you know, kind of stepping back in time when you go kind of deep into that driftless region, you know, there's people plowing their field with horses and you know just old just like it's like going back in time a little bit and there's so much to be captured from a photography standpoint outside of just the fishing portions of it you know and then you know then I got into the lower Wisconsin and like that is a whole nother landscape in and of itself, right? And you know if you were to take that picture and just tell someone like where do you think this is, like there Wisconsin would probably be on the at the bottom of the list of places they would think it was, right? And so it's been fun, like capturing this wild landscape. And I probably should have mentioned as well, like the lower Wisconsin River is a protected. It's like basically Wisconsin's version of a wild and scenic, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
You know they had like passed this law and there's like a governing board and like so none of it can really be developed except that with stuff that was already there is kind of grandfathered in and which there wasn't much of because it's a lot of like river bottom, so a lot of it's non-buildable to begin with. And so like it's just like this absolutely wild wilderness looking landscape, you know, 30 minutes from Madison, 3 hours from Chicago, right? And like it's like the one of the most quiet places I've been, and it's like you know it's kind of like my it influences a lot of what I do from a photo standpoint, anyways, and it's a good place to spend time. So
Well, Kyle, how do folks reach out to you? What's the best way for them to learn more about Black Earth angling?
yeah, I mean I think you know we have a pretty fun website. It's just blackearthangling.com. It'd be a good place to start and. We got pretty much everything you need to know about us on the website there, but also I'm pretty active on the social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook. It's just at Black Earth Angling Co. And like I said, you can follow a lot of our adventures. We do all sorts of fun stuff from you know our driftless trout to toothy critters to smallmouth bass to overnight camps, which I should probably mention a little thing about because that's pretty unique for us in this area. You're starting to see a few more of them pop up, but really like we kind of brought like overnight camps to this area, and we do something called the crash camp, which is like you know multi-day thing on the river where we're on an island and you basically show up with just like you can bring your sleeping bag and your fishing stuff and like we pick you up and you're out there like you know I always tell people you know camping is a wide scale of what people envision camping is. So if you do camp it's glamping, if you don't camp it's camping.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Perfectly.
And in that you know like we do a couple multi-day fishing trips and that's I think that's really good for especially people coming from a little further distance away, like you know we have like you know chefs we work with and you know like we have it dialed right, like our multi-day camps are awesome. You're gonna get awesome food, great fishing, and like we usually put these camps, they're usually like annual camps, so they're set during the same time period every year, and that's to take advantage of kind of the best of the best of the bass world. And so we do those, and then we also do some destination stuff. I'll be talking about some Yucatan tarpon and stuff like that at Great Waters.
Oh,
Cool.
awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, so We have it all on our Instagram page, so give me a follow, and you won't be disappointed. I suppose I do like to put out some good photography out there, and it's enjoyable whether you'll ever come fishing with me or not.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com, where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.